Okay, we're back with Proclus's commentary on Plato's Timaeus, and we were just dealing with why the world is called generated, in what sense it is generated, dealing with the eternity of the world as well, um, which Proclus will defend. The way that it's characterized in the Timaeus led to some confusion. Some Middle Platonists, like Plutarch, believed that there was a temporal beginning to the world. And there are different opinions there. Some believed that there was a period of chaos and a period of cosmos. Uh, Proclus rejects that and also rejects a literal interpretation of the myth from the statesman, where the world degrades and then is rejuvenated. So that's interesting. Some things you'd be surprised what Proclus does choose to take literally, um, and some things the opposite. So moving on here on the generable character of the world. Proclus. Moreover, the demonstration is worthy of admiration, viz., how scientifically it proceeds from definition. Hence also he inverts the order, for in the hypotheses, indeed, he defined that which is generated to be the object of opinion, but to the demonstration of that which is generated he assumes the converse, in order that he may make the definition to be the middle term, as in demonstrations is perfectly requisite. For this will cause what is said to be truly a demonstration. So this implies then that the Aristotelian concept of definition was already there as part of the dialectical repertoire that Plato was familiar with. And Plato also wouldn't have invented all of these methods of reasoning. It would have been something that was there in philosophical discourse already. Could be Pythagorean, could just be a perennial kind of philosophical method that was already established. For opinion, through possessing the reasons of generated natures, introduces the order of causes with reference to them. Okay, interesting. For opinion, through possessing the reasons, the principles of generated natures, introduces the order of causes with reference to them. Okay, so he assumed what is generated to be the object of opinion, and now opinion contains the logoi of nature, I suppose, insofar as they act as principles. Presumably, dianoia, or discursive reasoning, would know the logoi themselves. But then the logoi, insofar as they act as principles of nature, the spermatikos logos, I guess, those are known with the highest aspect of opinion. And so those principles are there in opinion, and we can unfold the orders of generated natures accordingly. So generated things are defined as that which opinion grasps, and then from opinion, what opinion. So what's the converse here that he was talking about? He defined that which is generated to be the object of opinion. So then he defines opinion as grasping generable natures, and so from opinion, we can get all the generated natures. So he introduces the order of causes with reference to them. Hence, it appears to me that Plato is not satisfied with the term sensible in order to demonstrate that the world is generated, but adds also that what is sensible is the object of opinion, since sense indeed knows the energy of sensibles in consequence of suffering by them, but opinion knows also their essence. So we're not just dealing with sensible objects, but that which is known by opinion Therefore, it contains sensible characteristics and also the principles of the sensibles. Opinion. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not quite grasping what opinion is exactly.
Do you remember the divided line from the Republic?
No.
Okay. Well, it's probably worth going through it. So you have 4 epistemological faculties. The highest is nous, intellect, and that grasps the forms, basically. The next highest, so the 2 higher ones are, uh, wait, what's the division? Intelligible versus sensible, I guess, natures. So the second division is dianoia, through thinking, and that's mathematical reasoning. And then the higher of the 2 sensible faculties is opinion, translated from pistis or doxa. That's its own epistemological faculty, and that grasps the being of sensible objects, not how they affect the senses, which is dealt with by the lowest of these faculties, icosia, the imaging faculty. So that receives the impression of sensibles, but opinion grasps that these senses are caused by something. So, sensibles or sensation, strictly speaking, gives you an image. Opinion gives you the idea that there is a thing there causing the images that are appearing in your sense. So opinion contains principles of sensibles. So we're not just dealing with sensible natures qua sensibles, but dealing with them in conjunction with opinion, which means we're dealing with their principles. Opinion knows the essences of sensibles and knows that which causes the energies that are received by sensitive faculties in ourselves. And so by making reference to sensibles known as objects of opinion, we encompass their nature more adequately, or we clarify their nature more adequately. But let's go ahead and go back to the text now. And actually, let's jump back up a little bit. For in the hypotheses, indeed, he defined that which is generated to be the object of opinion, but to the demonstration of that which is generated, he assumes the converse, in order that he may make the definition to be the middle term, as in demonstrations is perfectly requisite. Okay, so talking about the nature of that which is generated, he makes reference to opinion so that what is generated is defined as the objects of opinion. So for this will be the cause, this will cause what is said to be truly a demonstration, for opinion through possessing the reasons of generated natures introduces the order of causes with reference to them. Hence it appears to me that Plato is not satisfied with the term sensible in order to demonstrate that the world is generated, but adds also that what is sensible is the object of opinion. So by defining generable natures as that which is grasped by opinion, he's including their essences because that's there in what opinion is as an epistemological faculty. Since sense indeed knows the energy of sensibles in consequence of suffering by them, but opinion knows also their essences. So by defining generable natures on the faculty of opinion, we include the notion of their essences because that's in the faculty of opinion. So we define the nature of the generable world from our faculty of opinion, not merely sense, so that we capture their essences. We define what generation is more adequately. For it, opinion antecedently comprehends the reasons of them, reasons of sensibles. In order, therefore, that he might evince the essence of sensibles to be generated, he forms his demonstration from that which is the object of opinion, rather than merely sense. Farther still, his not adding that which is destructible to that which is generated shows his reverential conceptions of the world, though it is in a certain respect true that the world is destructible, as we have before said. At the same time, this exhibits to us the caution and reverence of Plato, for having that which is having that which is consequent to the being generated, yet he does not add it, when he ought to admire who thinks that which he ought to admire who thinks that the world was generated according to Plato in time. For this generated nature, which he calls the object of opinion, is at the same time destructible, but the world is not destructible at the same time that it is generated. Okay, so he ought to admire. So the fact that Plato doesn't call it destructible at the same time that he calls it generated, I think what Proclus is saying here is that the person who interprets Plato to be saying that the world has a beginning in time ought to pay attention to the fact that he omitted that it's destructible, because that clarifies which sense of generation he's actually referring to. And it's destructible in a sense, but he doesn't include it so as not to give the impression that the world goes through cycles of generation and destruction, because it doesn't actually do that. It's generable in a sense, but it doesn't actually get destroyed. And also the world as a god, it would be like not fitting to describe it as destructible. Although later on it is clarified that it is destructible in a sense, but is always held together by the benevolent will of the demiurge. So let's go on here. For this generated nature, which he calls the object of opinion, is at the same time destructible, but the world is not destructible at the same time that it is generated. Hence, the world is both destructible and incorruptible. Yet the philosopher does not call it both these according to the same, for this would be ridiculous, but he calls it incorruptible in the same manner as unbegotten, according to time. So the sense in which it's destructible is that all the parts are of a destructible nature, but the whole is not. For if that which is generated according to time is corruptible, as it is said to be in the Republic, that which is incorruptible is unbegotten. But the world is destructible as not being able to connect itself. For as that which is corporeal, so far as pertains to itself as alter motive, or moved by another, thus also, so far as pertains to itself, it is destructible, in consequence of being connected by something else. So that's the sense. So it's not just that all the parts are destructible. The problem is it's a body, and body is not self-constitutive in the way that soul is. The first three hypostases are genuine hypostases, right? So the one is a self-subsistent thing. The forms are self-defining, self-contained. They don't, like, all the forms contain all the other forms, so they don't need to make reference outside of themselves to account for their being. The forms have everything in them. Souls also have everything in them. So one soul contains, in some sense, the one itself, all the forms, all the other souls. It's self-constitutive. So everything is there that you need to define a soul in one soul. Body, because it's extended, does not have that concentrated form of being that constitutes a genuine ousia, or essence. So in that sense, it is destructible because it doesn't have that self-connective power that genuine hypostases do. Thus also, so far as pertains to itself, it is destructible in consequence of being connected by something else. For no body is either generative or connective of itself, since everything which generates makes, but everything which makes is incorporeal. So genuine efficient cause is impartible. Body can't be a genuine efficient cause. So body can't generate itself because it's not the kind of thing that can be an efficient cause. Only an impartible existence can be a genuine efficient cause. For though it should be a body, yet it makes by incorporeal powers. So the sense in which the cosmos is an efficient cause, it will be an efficient cause by virtue of incorporeal powers. Everything, therefore, which generates is incorporeal, and everything which connects is effective of a certain thing, viz., it is effective of union and the undissipated. But everything which is effective is impartible. Everything, therefore, connective is impartible. So connective powers confer unity. Unity can only be granted by that which is unified already. So that which is genuinely effective and connective is impartible. Hence, it is impossible for that which connects itself to be a body. For it is not the province of body to connect, since so far as it is body, it is partible, as it is said in the Sophist, against those who assert that all things are bodies. But that which connects is impartible. Yeah, so not all things can be bodies, because what is it that joins bodies? It can't just be further body. Body is defined on extension. If, however, that which is connected is body, but that which connects is incorporeal, body is not itself connective of itself. Hence, that which is connective by itself is necessarily impartible. As therefore body has in its own nature a finite power, so likewise it is in its own nature destructible, not as being adapted to corruption, but as not naturally capable of preserving itself. So it's not by its nature corruptible, because its nature is to, be what it is and do what it does. Its nature is not to be corrupted. But it doesn't have the nature to self-constitute and self-connect. So it's moved by another, it is preserved and connected by another, generated by another, but it's not of its nature corruptible, but is not naturally capable of preserving itself, nor as corruptible in capacity, that you may also investigate the corruptible in energy, but as incapable of imparting incorruptibility to itself. So it's not that it has a natural capacity to be corrupted. Instead, it's an imbecility of connecting and preserving itself. Similar to how evil is not an active thing, it is an absence of something else positive. So the corruptibility of the world is a lack of its ability to connect itself. Whence, therefore, has it the perpetual, and whence does it receive infinite power? Because no body is infinite. The cosmos is not spatially infinite here. So how does it have infinite power? And how is it perpetual? We reply, from its producing cause. For as it is moved from thence, so likewise it is generated from thence, and is always generated. For everything which is generated from an immovable cause is allotted a never-failing nature, as also the daimonical Aristotle says. So that according to this reasoning likewise, the world will have the perpetual proceeding from the immovable, i.e., from the intellectual fabrication. Since, however, according to its own proper nature it is generated, it is always generated from the Father. But since the world, being all and a whole, is not imperfect, in addition to being generated or becoming to be, it always was generated, since likewise the motion of it is always in the end, as Aristotle says. Yes, on the heavens, where the beginning and end of every celestial motion, because it's circular, is the same, because beginning and end point of circular motion is the same. Therefore, the generation will also be the termination. Therefore, it always has been terminating and always has been generated, always becoming to be. Much more, therefore, is the essential generation of it always in the end, imitating the perfection of its maker, so that it is always generated and always was generated, not receiving at once the whole infinity of the generative power of its maker, but always according to the now possessing the ability of existing from this power and receiving something from it, according to the instantaneous participation of infinity. So it participates of infinity through temporal instance, I think is the meaning of that. As it receives the same infinity, indeed, on account of that which is imparted, but on its own account is not able to receive the same at once. So because it has a temporal character, so the idea here is that the demiurge always gives everything. Gods always give all their possible energies. It is the failure of recipients to not receive infinite energy simultaneously. And infinite there is kind of taken relatively, or relative to the world, the powers of the demiurge are infinite. As in, they can't be bounded by the world. Instead, the world, in order to receive powers of the demiurge, has to receive them instantaneously, so to speak, or by instance, or by parts, because it's not able to receive the totality of it all at once. After this manner, therefore, the perpetuity of the world remains, and the generation of it takes place. And in this respect, the before-mentioned men, i.e. Plato and Aristotle, are not at variance. At the same time, however, they differ because Plato says that the essence of the universe is coextended with all time, but Aristotle supposes that it simply always exists, infers this to be necessary through many arguments, and ascribes to it temporal infinity, asserting at the same time that eternity is stable infinite power. He likewise demonstrates that no infinite power whatever can be present with a finite body. Hence it follows that the world, being corporeal, always receives infinite power, but never has the whole of it, because it is finite. It is therefore alone true to say that from infinite power it is generated, but is not infinitely. But if it is generated, it receives infinity on account of time, for to be infinite pertains alone to that which is eternal, but a generated infinite belongs to that which is temporal, for generation is conjoined with time. Hence, Aristotle himself is compelled to acknowledge that the world is in a certain respect generated. Okay, yeah, Aristotle was trying to treat the world as basically eternally, perpetually moved of its own nature. So Aristotle basically what Plato gives to the demiurge, Aristotle wants the universe by its own nature to have. As we just saw, interestingly, in the Taylor dissertation on Aristotle's philosophy. So Aristotle wants the outermost heaven to be perpetual by its nature, which though would give it an infinite power, dunamis meaning power and also potential. So if it has the potential of infinite motion in itself, but is a finite body, that's kind of a contradiction. Instead, we need to say that the world is of a generable character. It doesn't have that infinite power in itself. It receives it from outside. So Plato says it receives it, but not laboriously. Aristotle, you could kind of see his arguments. You could watch the other stream, like the previous stream on this channel, on Taylor's dissertation on Aristotle's philosophy to see that. But Aristotle argued against the universe being perpetually held in being or in motion by another, because that would be laborious, and the higher powers that were capable of moving the whole world wouldn't be laborers. They would have intellectual time to do stuff. But Plato may resolve that by saying that the demiurge creates by reflecting on himself, It's not actually an outward going. The emanation is like a surplus, a superabundance. It's not laborious. Neoplatonists are actually like at pains to describe emanative processes as not laborious. Maybe partly because of those arguments of Aristotle. So that is a point of difference. Aristotle wants to arrogate more powers to the world itself than Plato. But both say the world is infinite in time, but even Aristotle will have to say that it is, in a certain respect, generated anyway. But Plato has like the fuller explanation of why that is, or at least Neoplatonists do. Both likewise assert that it is the same in number, but Plato, conformably to principles, says that it is generated. For he established prior to the universe a producing cause from which he gives subsistence to the universe. But Aristotle does not admit that any eternal nature is an effective cause. I feel like that's contestable, but okay. And the former, indeed, like Simplicius would probably say, well, if you interpret carefully this passage from the Metaphysics, Aristotle does say, whereas Proclus is much more combative towards Aristotle. And the former, indeed, Plato, generates time together with the essence of the universe, but the latter together with motion, for time, according to him, is that which is numbered. Aristotle, however, is accustomed to do this in his other treatises. So time for Plato is at the same level as the universe. Both are created together, like space and time, in other words, are joined, whereas for Aristotle, it's motion and time. For such things as Plato asserts of the one, Aristotle ascribes to intellect, viz., the non-possession of multitude, the desirable, the having no intellectual perception of secondary natures. Footnote: Aristotle, in his metaphysical discussions, ascends no higher than intelligible intellect, which is with him the first cause, and perhaps this was in consequence of knowing that all beyond this intellect is truly ineffable. So that's Taylor's take. Yeah, as I've said many times before, Aristotle's ontology seems to be Plato's ontology, cutting off everything above the demiurge, although Taylor says above intelligible intellect, which would be Chronos, rather than the demiurge, strictly speaking. Okay. But such things as Plato attributes to the demiurgic intellect, Aristotle ascribes to the heavens and the celestial gods, for according to him, fabrication and providence are from these. That one passage from On the Heavens could potentially contradict that. Perhaps Proclus is following Alexander's reading of that passage in order to not ascribe these powers to supercelestial beings in Aristotle. We would have to revisit that passage and compare to really analyze this case. But at least in Proclus's reading of Aristotle, he's ascribing all of these powers to the heavens. And I said, like, a lot of Aristotle could be interpreted that way. It looks like he's giving all these powers to the stars themselves. For according to him, fabrication and providence are from these. Such things also as Plato ascribes to the essence of the heavens, Aristotle attributes to their circular motion. So like I was saying above, like Aristotle wants to arrogate more powers to the universe than Plato does. Where, ironically, like Aristotle's own arguments about the limits of corporeal nature and finite nature should lead him to Plato's conclusions. But such things also as Plato ascribes to the essence of the heavens, Aristotle attributes to their circular motion, departing indeed from theological principles, but dwelling more than is fit on physical productive powers. Yeah. This is because he discussed metaphysics physically, just as Plato discussed physics metaphysically. That's Taylor. So, in some sense, Taylor, being a fan of Simplicius, wants to reconcile, and I guess he's saying where Aristotle does arrogate more powers to the heavens themselves, he is in some way actually describing metaphysical processes, but through physical analogies, maybe, but you'd have to do a lot of hermeneutical jerry-rigging to do that. All right, since, however, the daimonical Aristotle is very copious in discussing the reciprocations of the generated with reference to the corruptible, that they mutually entail, and of the unbegotten with reference to the incorruptible, he must be reminded that Plato, much prior to him, assents to these axioms, in the Republic indeed, asserting that corruption follows everything which is generated, but in the Phaedrus, that the unbegotten is also incorruptible. How is it possible, therefore, since Plato gives generation to the universe, that he should not also introduce corruption to it? Or that corrupting that which is moved in a confused and disorderly manner, he should not give generation to it prior to corruption? The generation of the universe, therefore, was devised by him after a manner different from its apparent meaning. Okay, so Plato accepts that generation and corruption mutually entail, and yet he does not ascribe corruption to the universe. Therefore, the generation of the universe he means in an alternative sense to temporal generation, basically. All defending Proclus's reading of what is meant by generation here, and I think it's been persuasive. I think Middle Platonists like Plutarch are refuted. How long has the stream been going? A half hour. We could go to the next lemma, but then we'll... Oh, actually, the next lemma is very short, which is not typical. But so, Timaeus in the text, but we say that whatever is generated is necessarily generated by a certain cause. Proclus. The discussion accords with the hypotheses, or rather with the order of the things from which the hypotheses are assumed. So that he's discussing things according to the first principles that he's putting forward. For as like the order of the discussion follows, for as everywhere form is suspended from the efficient cause, so likewise the first hypotheses are in continuity with the second, and afford a principle to the demonstrations which are consequent to them. For since it was demonstrated according to the first hypothesis that the world was generated through the object of opinion as a medium, afterwards, that which is consequent to this is demonstrated according to the second hypothesis, viz., that it was generated by a cause. For if the world is a thing generated, or becoming to be, but everything generated is generated by a certain cause, hence the world was necessarily generated by a certain cause. What, therefore, is the producing cause of the universe? That from which the being generated is present to the world. For it is necessary to investigate this immediately after the present demonstration. And we shall see, as we proceed, what kind of arguments Plato uses on this subject. Now, however, let us briefly recall to our memory the reasoning by which it is shown that everything which is generated is necessarily generated by a certain cause. Everything generated, therefore, is in its own nature imperfect. But being imperfect, it is not naturally adapted to perfect itself, since neither is any other imperfect thing. Nor everything which is perfected, for everything which is perfected from that which is in energy. You can see fuller argumentation about that in the Elements of Theology. So everything being perfected, everything which is brought into act or realized from potency is brought into act by something which is actual. So energy is always the active party naturally. So, all right, when something is perfected, it's generated from something which is an energy, but that which an energy there means activity. So think potency and act and potency here. I think my mouse is still wanting to die. We may have to stop soon. Actually, you know what? I don't want to run into a situation where I'm left without a mouse and I can't end the stream. That happened once before. So for technical reasons, we're going to actually come back to this lemma next time. So there we go. We'll end the stream. Any thoughts on the reading? It's funny that it's like concording. It's just lining up perfectly with the Taylor reading.
Yeah, that is cool, and I like how they're contrasting Plato and Aristotle's views a lot.
Yeah, you have like, and then Simplicius trying to harmonize them, Proclus trying to give wins to Plato. So definitely an entertaining set of texts to read. But all right.
I definitely got like half of that.
Okay, well, at least you got something, so that's good.
Yeah.
Thanks for participating, guys. We'll pick this up next week, and take care.